Welcome back to Tongue of the Serpent. Last time, Renard Blackwood found himself pulled from the road and into Hecate's keeping, where crossroads, mirrors, and old laws began to reveal what Lucifer's broken bargain had made of him. At the crew of the Morning Star, Lucian, Evelyn, Alice, and Madame Claudette faced the terrible, practical question of Sabine's remains. While Lucifer arrived with an offer no one could comfortably refuse and no one could safely accept. Elsewhere, Mercy and Cassian followed the records of the Sisters of the Purple Veil to a small orphanage school outside Alexandria. The paperwork suggested something Mercy had not expected. After the order burned, some of the women she once knew may have built a shelter for magical children, but paper can only carry a story so far. Tonight, Mercy and Cassian go to see what remains. Renard steps deeper into the architecture of Hecate's question. In houses, as it turns out, remember far more than anyone politely asked them to. This is episode 24, The House That Remembered. The road to Alexandria. The drive to Alexandria carried them out of the city and into the long green body of Louisiana, where distance liked to disguise itself as sameness, and every bend in the road looked as though it might be keeping a secret. Cassian drove. In the back of the car, he had spread papers in an untidy stack that kept trying to slide to the floor whenever he turned. Printouts, parcel records, and site sketches pulled from permits and parish paperwork. He approached the whole search with the determined patience of a man who believed enough tabs and annotations could eventually corner the truth. Mercy sat beside him with her hands folded in her lap, watching the world pass in layers of gray and green. Telephone poles moved by in solemn rhythm. Gas stations rose and vanished. Small churches appeared by the roadside with their signs promising salvation in black plastic letters. The sky hung low and pale, the color of old pewter.
If they built this place after the order burned,
Mercy said after a while.
If they built this place after the order burned, then I knew them. They knew me. They knew Lenore.
Cassian glanced over, then back at the road.
I don't remember them,
she said.
That is the part that keeps twisting.
Her voice stayed level, though the ache beneath it showed clearly enough. She had worked alongside those women once, prayed with them, and passed them in hallways. They had shared meals and duties, possibly for years, even decades. Her mind, scoured and broken in the right places by grief and magic, had left her with the shape of absence instead of the people themselves.
They remembered you,
Cassian said. Mercy looked out at the cypress and shallow water flashing by.
Yes,
she said softly.
Enough to build something after they believed Lenore and I were gone.
That thought sat with them for a while. Women she had known, women now lost behind the fogged glass of her own damaged memory, had gathered what remained of their faith and built shelter for children who needed it. They had found it a small place at first, a temporary place, by the look of the records. They'd stayed for 2 or 3 years in Alexandria before they found somewhere larger, somewhere stronger, somewhere able to hold what they were trying to protect. Cassian glanced back at the papers at a stop sign.
We'll start with the main grounds. The main building, focusing on chapel space. If they moved in a hurry, or even in good order, there may still be traces.
Mercy nodded. He spoke practically, but she could feel the care beneath it. He was in this with her now, passing beyond curiosity or usefulness. He had become one of the people, helping her carry the weight. The road curved. Ahead, beyond a line of trees and a sagging fence, the old Purple Veil Orphanage came into view. It sat back from the road in a hush of weeds and weather. Shuttered windows staring out across the fields, its chapel roof rising above the rest like a hand that had kept trying to bless the place long after everyone inside had gone. Hecate's test. Hecate led him to the crossing without once checking whether he followed. That was the sort of courtesy gods seldom bother with. They assumed obedience the way storms assumed roofs. The drowned midway thinned away behind them. Ahead lay open ground, if ground was the right word for a place that behaved like a verdict. 3 roads met there beneath a hanging scatter of candle flames. Each flame burned steady and watchful, as though it had been assigned witness duty and intended to perform it well. Renaud Blackwood stopped walking. The first road smelled of carnival smoke, lamp oil, trampled grass, and the old warm animal scent of canvas that had held too many seasons. Gold light moved somewhere along it, tender and treacherous. He heard laughter there, a girl's laughter first. Doe, younger, before illness or fading or fear. Then came Raven's voice, older, sharper, carrying across the midway with the authority of someone who had long ago accepted the burden of being the one who kept count. Underneath both came the creak of wagons, the hum of generators, the pulse of a life built from motion and performance and secrets carried in plain sight. Home, or the version of home memory polished when it wanted something from you. The second road held New Orleans. Rain fell on brick. Iron balconies turned black with weather. Courtyards listened through the night. New Orleans glowed down that road with all the dangerous tenderness of a place that learned exactly how to keep him. The crew of the Morning Star was there, stitched into him now more deeply than he liked admitting. Lucian, grave and glittering, with the impossible authority of someone who felt by turns like father, brother, judge, and shelter. Evelyn, whose kindness had a patience in it that could outlast shame. Sister Mercy, with her no-nonsense practicality and sharp humor, hiding her deep grief. And there, woven through them all, the girl from the cemetery. He had saved her from an angel among the tombs, then found her again at the little college in the Marigny, as though the city kept placing her in his path for reasons of its own. He did not know her name. He did not know what bound his attention to her so quickly, so stubbornly. He only knew he was drawn to her with the helpless certainty of a tide answering the moon. The third road ran into shadows so deep it seemed to absorb even the idea of comfort. The air over it carried the dry taste of old bargains and older consequences. Law lived there, and so did the names spoken carefully. Somewhere far down that path waited the machinery behind the curtain, the hard bones under story and superstition alike. Renaud looked from one road to the next and let out a low breath.
Well,
he said.
That's cheerful.
Hecate said nothing. The carnival road shifted. For a moment, he saw Doe as a child, slight and bright and quick-footed, darting between lanterns with that reckless confidence younger siblings often developed when older sisters existed to do the worrying for them. Then Raven appeared further back, arms folded, already carrying the expression of someone who had spent half her life preparing to take charge of disasters not yet arrived. The image changed again. Uncle Leo stood in the flare of the midway lights, broad and lion-maned, all judgment and old authority. Ursus stood nearby, heavy-shouldered and steady, bearing his strength the way some men carried water buckets or bad family history. Leo belonged to the kind of family power that always arrived with a price. Ursus belonged to the kinder sort, which usually meant it hurt more when you failed it. Renard felt that dangerous, lying throb of nostalgia for family and a warm, loving childhood he'd never actually had. The New Orleans road shimmered faintly. It felt safer in some ways, but stranger in others. The family there had chosen him, which remained one of the more suspicious miracles of his life. The dark road waited. It made no promises. It offered no one's arms, no homecoming, no absolution, no warm light in the distance. It held knowledge with all the charm of a legal document and twice the danger.
I never asked for any of this.
Renard snapped.
I never asked to become the flaw in somebody else's bargain. I never asked to be a symbol or a key or whatever useful little flaw in the wall everyone suddenly finds interesting.
Hecate regarded him with the patient stillness of old statues and deep water. Asking, she said, rarely governs shape. The candle flames tipped very slightly, as if the crossroads appreciated insolence when properly phrased. He looked again at the roads, carnival smoke and blood memory, Raven's competence, Doe's fading smile, Leo's hard standards, and Ursus, solid as shelter and nearly as difficult to disappoint. New Orleans and the life he had built sideways, almost by accident. The city that had taken one look at his damage and handed him a room anyway. The third road, promising darkness and the slippery laws of bargains with the infernal and the supernatural. He had spent too many years catching himself oddly in the world's edges. Doors opened wrong around him. Roads seemed to answer when he stepped onto them. Mirrors lagged, sulked, fractured, or showed him as if they were consulting among themselves first. Threshold magic took notice of him. Crossings remembered him. He was tired of living inside a pattern he did not understand. Renard looked at Hecate.
If I choose badly...
Her silence stretched long enough to become educational. You will have still chosen, she said.
That,
said Renard,
is appalling.
It is also how roads work. He almost laughed, almost. Then he turned away from the roads that offered comfort and belonging, and took the one that offered knowledge with all the hospitality of a locked archive. The dark path opened under his feet. Behind him, somewhere out on the drowned midway, the carnival music changed key. Alexandria, the little purple veil house. The front door stuck for a moment, then gave way with the weary sigh of a house that had spent several years being left alone and formed opinions about interruption. Mercy stepped inside first. The air held dust, old soap, lamp oil, and the faint, dry sweetness of linens, packed away in a hurry that had still made room for care. 5 years had softened the place without erasing it. Dust had settled on the windowsills. Damp had freckled one corner of the ceiling. The wallpaper in the front room had started peeling in thin, curling strips. Time had entered politely and taken a seat. Ruin had not yet arrived. Cassian came in behind her, recorder in one hand, phone in the other, backpack bumping the door frame because the hall was narrow and the house had been built in an era when people were apparently expected to need less room for themselves and almost no room at all for their equipment. The place was small. It possessed a front room that had once served as sitting room, classroom, and probably dining room whenever practicality demanded it. A little office tucked beside it, barely large enough for a desk and shelves. A washroom at the back with 2 low basins. One sleeping room with 4 iron bed frames and a single wardrobe left open, empty as a confession. And off the rear hall, the nursery. 6 children, Mercy thought. 4 women, if they were all disciplined and fond of one another. They'd had enough room for shelter and hiding. They'd had room enough for keeping watch and shifts and pretending exhaustion was a spiritual exercise. Cassian moved into the office and crouched by the shelves.
Whoever left here did it neatly.
Dust outlined 3 boxes that had once sat side by side. The desk drawers stood open and empty. A nail on the wall still held a string tag with no key attached.
They had practice by then,
Mercy said. Cassian glanced up.
At leaving?
at surviving.
He glanced at her quickly, registering the hard truth. He checked the recorder. It flickered once, then steadied.
No major interference yet.
Yes.
Mercy repeated with the calm of a woman who had grown up in spiritual warfare and therefore regarded optimism as useful in moderation. They moved on. In the sleeping room, one narrow bed still held the faint depression of a mattress long since removed. A broken loop of purple ribbon hung from a peg near the wardrobe. Cassian touched it gently and drew his fingers back with the expression of a man who understood at once that objects sometimes carried more sorrow than they had any right to. Mercy stood very still in the doorway.
I knew them.
She said quietly. Cassian turned.
I don't remember them, but I knew them. One of them would have hummed while she folded things. One would have had a limp in wet weather. One would have been the sort that always took the latest watch and pretended she preferred it.
Cassian did not answer for a moment. The room seemed to deserve better than immediate speech.
Memory wipes are cruelly specific,
He said at last. Mercy gave a short, humorless smile.
Grief can manifest as cruelty intended to be kind.
They found 6 hooks by the washroom door, set low enough for children to reach their own towels or night clothes. The basins had been mounted lower than ordinary height. A little shelf by the wall held the dusty ghost rings of 6 cups once kept in a row. The place was full of small things, domestic things, a proof of care and practical handwriting. Cassian stood in the washroom doorway, staring at the low basins.
Every time I expect something grim,
He said.
I find something considerate instead.
Mercy rested her hand against the frame.
That is how hidden goodness often survives. It stays quiet without a need to market itself.
He snorted despite himself. Then they reached the nursery. It was the warmest room in the house in design, though the warmth now existed only in suggestion. Faded moon and star wallpaper ran around the upper wall. A rocking chair sat in the corner with a folded blanket over one arm, gray with dust, and only just beginning to forget the shape of hands. A low shelf beneath the window held a few wooden toys, a cracked cup, and a ledger half hidden under a scrap of fallen wallpaper. Along one wall, cot spaces had been marked out by habit more than furniture. The cots themselves were gone. The room still remembered where they had stood. Mercy crossed to the wall where the wards had been painted. Even frayed, their purpose showed clearly enough. They were sigils for sleep, calmness, and protection against nightmares. They would have helped soften the magical surges in children, too young to understand what had awakened in them. This was the sort of work done by women who understood that fear often arrived in small bodies first. She touched one of the faded symbols with 2 fingers. Cassian looked down at the recorder.
It spiked.
It remembers,
Mercy said. She lifted a ledger from the shelf with the care due to old paper and small truths. The leather had dried. The binding held. 5 years was long enough to leave a mark, short enough for pages to keep their discipline. Inside the book lay supply lists, fever notes, names, and small domestic records written in 2 or 3 different hands. Accounts of one child refusing broth for 2 days, of a nightmare repeated enough times to warrant a notation. One child was written to remind Sister Claire that the fox story worked better than the lamb story when consoling a certain boy after storms. Mercy stopped there.
The fox story.
You know which Sister Claire was?
No.
Mercy turned the page.
I only know she was kind.
Those words, more than anything, seemed to trouble the room. The temperature dropped. Cassian straightened at once. The recorder in his hand spat a burst of static. Frost began threading itself over the nursery window in delicate white veins. The rocking chair gave one slow forward sway and settled back with the dry little creak of old wood, thinking twice. Mercy closed her eyes briefly, knowing before she appeared what was coming. Mother Superior Agnes. The house had been quiet until now, quiet in the way hidden places often were when left to themselves. Agnes would change that. Mercy and Cassian had given her names at the ruins. Sisters. Lenore. Enough breadcrumbs for a mind like Agnes's to begin listening for a different kind of echo. It would be enough to feed the vengeful spirit at the ruins of the Order. Cassian swallowed.
She found the trail.
Mercy opened her eyes.
We taught her what to look for.
The little mirror above the washstand clouded over. A shape deepened in the silver, then in the doorway. Between one breath and the next, she stood in the room entire, gathered out of reflection, cold and old authority held together by will. Mother Superior Agnes. Her spirit was arrayed in burned lace and scorched wool. A ruined veil clung to one side of her face in a blackened fold. Her face still carried that terrible contradiction Mercy remembered from the ruins. Grand motherly softness laid over zeal like linen stretched across a blade. When Agnes saw Mercy, joy flared across her features with all the sweetness and horror of a candle catching too fast.
"My child,"
she said softly. Mercy's mouth hardened.
Don't.
Agnes scarcely seemed to hear. Her gaze moved to the nursery with feverish hunger, across the 6 cot spaces, the low shelves, the comfort wards, the faded wallpaper, the blanket on the chair, the ledger in Mercy's hands. She took in the room the way a starving woman might take in a locked pantry after hearing at last where the key had gone.
"This is where they came,"
she whispered.
"This is where they hid among the others."
Cassian frowned.
You mean after Mercy and I handed you enough names to make you dangerous?
Agnes turned her head toward him. Her contempt arrived instantly and without ceremony.
"You opened the right wound,"
she said.
"You spoke of sisters who fled, of a child taken, of my lost Lenore."
She savored the name with dreadful reverence.
"Once named, a thing leaves traces."
Mercy felt the ledger tremble slightly in her grip.
So you came looking for them?
She said. Agnes smiled. It was radiant. It was ghastly. It was hungry.
"The dead listen very well,"
she said.
"This little house is full of residue. Prayers, protection, milk, fear, fever. A little nest made by women, too sentimental to let miracle pass into stronger hands."
That was the true shape of her under the righteousness, the desire for acquisition. Her hunger had dressed itself in holiness years ago and had never once considered removing the costume.
She is not yours,
Mercy said. Agnes's expression changed. The warmth in it curdled.
"She was marked,"
Agnes said.
"She was chosen. She should have been raised where her nature could be understood, guarded, cultivated. Instead, they stole her. They wrapped power in blankets and called it mercy."
Cassian, inching toward the wall with the air of a man trying to perform emergency theology from memory, pressed one of Claudette's charms against a surviving ward. The ward gave a weak, gold pulse. Agnes's head snapped toward him.
"Always men,"
she said coldly.
"Blundering into inner rooms and mistaking interruption for protection."
Cassian swallowed.
I am truly doing my best.
Mercy kept her eyes on Agnes.
You still haven't found them.
Agnes went very still, frustration lighting up in her eyes. Beneath the triumph, beneath the fevered delight of knowing Lenore had lived and the sisters had survived, lay the simpler and uglier truth. She had found the old house. She had found traces. She had arrived hungry.
"They moved carefully,"
Agnes said after a moment.
"They stripped the shelves. They carried out the ledgers and batches and buried the trail under ordinary paper and pious little lies. Someone helped them, probably someone local and practiced."
Mercy tightened her grip on the ledger.
And still, you are here.
The spirit known as Agnes surged in anger. The mirror behind her split with a clean white crack. Frost climbed the window in a rush. Cassian slapped his palm against the ward and said something that began as a prayer, picked up speed as an improvisation, and ended with the general tone of a man filing a complaint with heaven. The ward failed. Agnes recoiled, edges fraying.
"She lives,"
she hissed, and the reverence in the words made them filthy.
"After all these years in the fire, after their attempt to conceal her, she lives.
Lenore. Mercy felt the name without needing to hear it spoken again. Her daughter had become a beacon in the mind of a dead fanatic.
You are late,
Mercy said. Agnes's whole face changed. Rage rose through her like a floodwater breaking a lock.
For now.
Then the ward light caught fully. Her form tore apart into mirror glimmer, frost, and chapel strato remembered from another place. The cold broke all at once. Silence rushed in behind it. Cassian bent double, hands on his knees.
I would like a less educational afternoon.
Mercy lowered her gaze, fighting her frustration. She straightened her shoulders, knowing that she would dig deeper until she found where they went. She didn't care if they had to scour every last record in that corruption-laden state, but they would find her. Quiet aftermath. When Lucifer left, the courtyard seemed to exhale through its teeth. The warmth went with him. So did a certain bright, infernal pressure, the kind that made the air feel expensive. In its place came the older atmosphere of the house itself. Jasmine, damp stone, fountain water, candle soot, and the particular moral exhaustion that followed any encounter with the devil in which he had offered something useful. Alice Renault drifted toward the table with Madame Claudette's notes, keeping close to Claudette without quite admitting that was what she was doing. Claudette busied herself gathering charms and papers with the concentrated dignity of a woman who had no intention of discussing how much she disliked finding Lucifer Morningstar in her workspace. Lucien Devereaux remained by the fountain. Evelyn watched him for a moment, then crossed to stand at his side. The water moved under the morning light with its usual surface grace, though she knew better than to trust appearances in this house.
You wanted to say yes,
she said. Lucien let out a quiet breath that carried no surprise at being known so precisely.
For a moment.
He admitted.
A shamefully long one.
Evelyn rested her hand against the fountain rim beside his.
Wanting the shortcut is ordinary. Taking it is where people get ruined.
Lucien inclined his head, accepting the correction because he knew it came from mercy rather than judgment. Before either of them could say more, the house twitched. A candle near the archway guttered and burned black for one ugly second before righting itself. The mirror in the hallway beyond the courtyard gave a faint, restless tremor, as though someone had brushed past it from the wrong side. Then the fountain water changed. A narrow current formed in the basin and turned against the natural flow, circling once tight and purposeful, before going still. Lucien straightened. Evelyn looked toward the hallway. The house had gone quiet in a way that felt deliberate. There was the silence of something counting its living. A flicker crossed the far edge of the courtyard wall. It moved too quickly to assume a form, but it felt too deliberate to be mere chance. Evelyn felt the knowledge arrive before the name did. Someone of theirs was missing. Hecate's revelation. The dark road brought Renard to a house that had no business standing where it stood. It rose out of the drowned blackness on thin brick foundations, narrow and many-windowed, with galleries that led nowhere sensible and a roof line that kept changing its mind. Doors opened onto water. Windows looked out on carnival light, marsh reeds, city rain, and once, for the length of a blink, the inside of a church he had never seen. The whole structure had the logic of a dream assembled by a magistrate. Every threshold seemed deliberate. Every hinge carried significance. The place did not feel haunted. It felt employed. Renard Blackwood stopped at the foot of the porch stairs. Hecate stood beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The house creaked softly to itself, settling in all the wrong directions. Somewhere upstairs, a door clicked shut. Somewhere else, one opened. Renard looked at the nearest window. His reflection stood there, a fraction too still. Watching him with the faint suspicion mirrors seemed to reserve especially for him.
This,
he said,
is deeply unpleasant.
Hecate did not disagree. He turned toward her now. By now, he had exhausted surprise and was operating on something colder. His inner spine had steadied. A man can only be informed that he is central to infernal structural damage so many times before the information begins to lose its decorative qualities and settle into practicality.
You brought me here because Lucifer broke the bargain.
He said.
Because the law remembers. Because I am apparently where the crack lives.
He gestured at the house.
And now what?
Hecate's gaze moved over him with grave patience.
Now you consider.
Renard gave a short laugh.
That sounds suspiciously like being stored on a shelf until useful.
You are at a crossing,
she said.
You remain there whether you approve or not.
That irritated him because it was true, and truth delivered without courtesy had a way of doing that. He looked back at the house. One of the upper windows had begun showing New Orleans rain. Another gave onto a courtyard lined with old mirrors. Another looked straight into darkness, thick as ink.
You want me to help you get at him,
Renard said.
I want you to understand what you are inside.
He folded his arms.
I'm not making a bargain with you.
No?
No.
He responded immediately.
I have had enough crossroads beings taking an interest in my future. One infernal mistake has already left me standing in architecture designed by lunatics. I am not agreeing to anything else.
For the first time, something almost like approval touched Hecate's face. It passed quickly, subtle as moonlight shifting on water.
Good,
she said. He frowned in surprise.
Good.
A choice made unwilling is poor currency.
The house gave another soft, settling groan. A window on the second floor flickered from marsh to midway to a brief, shining glimpse of the crew courtyard before going dark again. Renard felt his breath catch. Home, or near enough to injure. He stepped toward it instinctively, and the front door opened by itself. Inside lay a hall with too many doors. Some stood ajar, some were shut. Some showed lamplight beneath them. At the far end, a staircase rose and vanished into dimness. On the walls hung empty frames and tarnished mirrors, each one holding a depth that suggested reflection might be only the most superficial surface they offered. Renard stopped on the threshold.
If I walk in there,
he said,
am I trapped?
Hecate's answer came with the calm of old things, speaking plain facts.
You are already within the question.
He turned to her sharply.
That is not reassuring.
I did not bring you here for reassurance.
No, she had brought him here for convenience, to keep him as a card to be played in some game of her own design against an opponent at a crossroads game older than myth itself. Renard looked into the hall again, at the doors, the windows, and the reflections. It was a house built for wandering, a place for choosing and hesitating and seeing too much through glass. He stayed stubbornly in place. After a moment, he said,
I refuse.
Hecate inclined her head once, accepting the word as though it had entered properly into record.
For now,
she said. The candles along the porch rail brightened. The black water below the steps gave a slow turn.
You will choose eventually, Renard Blackwood. Doors are patient. Crossroads, more so.
He held her gaze.
You sound very certain.
I am.
And with that, she stepped backward into shadow and was gone, abruptly and completely, as though the world had remembered she was allowed to leave any room before the rest of reality had finished adjusting to her presence. Renard stood alone at the threshold of the impossible house. Behind him was the endless black water, and before him the hall with its many doors. Above him were windows lit by places he knew and places he did not. After a long moment, he went inside. The front door swung shut behind him with the soft and final sound of a decision postponing itself. Thank you for listening to Tongue of the Serpent. Tonight, the trail led Mercy and Cassian into the little purple veil house outside of Alexandria, where care had left its traces in low basins, faded wards, empty cot spaces, and ledgers full of small human mercies. Renard, meanwhile, stood at another threshold entirely, surrounded by doors, mirrors, black water, and choices that refused to become simple. Some places hold grief, some hold law, some hold both, and wait for the right person to step inside. The search for Lenore has changed shape. Sabine's tether remains unresolved. Lucifer's broken bargain still echoes through the roads, and somewhere between New Orleans, Alexandria, and the crossroads beyond the world, the old powers are beginning to count what belongs to whom. Until next time, keep your candles trimmed, your mirrors covered when they grow too curious. And remember, a house left empty is not always a house left alone.